was supposed to be one of, if not the last, delivery of the night for me. I was working at this pizzeria called Leonardo's. One of my bosses, Frank, was on the night shift with me, and he would choose who did which delivery. We got an order for a couple of regular pizzas, and he gave me a piece of paper with the address and the person's phone number. This was back in 2009, and I didn't have a cell phone with GPS, just a basic flip phone. I also didn't have one of those Garmin GPS systems, so I had to rely on an old-school book of maps to find my way around while doing deliveries. The street I was supposed to deliver to was called something like Willows Road. I can't remember the house number, nor the name given for the order, but I do remember having a hard time finding the place. It was in a rural town, with nothing but woods, farmland, and more woods. The lack of streetlights didn't help. I had to pull over a few times, turning on the interior lights to check the map again. It was stressful whenever I couldn't find a house. This was a very quiet, dark, and confusing road. I decided to just call the number on the paper my boss gave me. The phone rang multiple times with no answering machine. It rang about 10 times before someone finally picked up. I waited for them to say hello, but no one did, so I spoke first. That's when I heard a low, deep, yet soft voice repeat hello back to me. I told them I was the pizza guy and had trouble finding the place. The man explained his driveway was easy to miss and looked like a dirt trail. He spoke in a slow, monotone voice, giving me directions to help me find it. Eventually, I did. I turned onto a narrow dirt path that was definitely easy to miss. After about 30 seconds of driving slowly, I saw a small one-story house come into view. A faint orange glow shone from inside, visible through one of the windows. I parked next to an old pickup truck, grabbed the pizzas, and walked to the front door. There wasn't a doorbell, so I knocked. I heard muffled music inside and then footsteps approaching. The door cracked open just a bit, and I could see one of their eyes peeking out. I nervously asked, "You ordered the pizza, right?" The man responded, "Oh yes, the pizza," in the same voice from the phone. There was a weird pause, and I asked if he had the cash. He said, "Yes, let me go get it," and walked away from the door. As I waited, I noticed old 1930s music playing from inside. The door, which was only cracked open before, slowly crept open on its own, revealing more of the room. The place was dimly lit, and everything looked ancient. Metal sheets covered holes in the floor, and all the furniture seemed like it belonged in another century. The smell was what really got to me. It smelled like death. I waited for what felt like too long. I knocked on the door and said, "Sir?" His voice called out from another room, asking, "Would you mind coming into the kitchen, please?" My coworkers and boss had always told me to never step inside someone's house if I didn't have to. That advice felt especially important now. I asked him to repeat what he said, and he repeated, "Can you come to the kitchen, please?" I reluctantly stepped inside, and the floor creaked and sagged beneath my feet. The house was very linear, and as I looked to the right, I saw the entrance to the kitchen. Then I glanced down the narrow hallway to the left. That's when I saw a man, the same man from before, but this time he was slowly dancing in the creepiest way possible. He was feeling his own body as he moved. I turned back to the kitchen, still holding the pizzas. That's when I noticed the man again, peeking from around the edge of the wall, showing only part of his face, just like at the front door. I didn't know what to think, and I nervously asked again, "Do you have the cash?" Instead of answering, he started to giggle, a soft but deep and unsettling sound. Then he called out, "Randall," in a loud and commanding voice, completely different from his previous tone. That was it for me. I turned around and headed for the front door. As I was about to step outside, I glanced back down the hallway and saw the man who had been dancing was now standing perfectly still, staring at me. I hurried to my car, still holding the pizzas, threw them onto the passenger seat, and started the engine. As I backed up, I glanced at the house again. The door was wide open, but I didn't stick around to see if anyone came outside. When I got back to the pizzeria, I told Frank what happened. He and the others laughed when they heard the story, but it didn't feel funny in the moment. Whatever was going on in that house wasn't normal, and I'm pretty sure they had no intention of paying for pizza. I've had dreams about that man's face, peeking around the wall ever since, and from then on, I never stepped inside a customer's house while doing deliveries. I'm currently 20 years old, but at the time of the story, I was 19. I live in Newark, Delaware, a usually small and quiet town, at least until college season rolls around in the fall and spring. Newark is home to the University of Delaware, a large and widely respected school in the U.S. It's also known for being a big party school, so when the college kids arrive, things get a lot more lively. Anyway, I work as a bicycle delivery guy at Jimmy John's, and I still have the job as of telling this story. This event took place on either a Tuesday or Wednesday night in the spring. It was either late April or early May, though I can't remember exactly. It was during my typical 7 p.m. to 2 a.m. shift. The Jimmy John's I work at stays open until 2 on the weekdays and 3 on weekends, so we're one of the few places still open in town, aside from the bars. A lot of drunk college kids storm the place, so needless to say, it gets pretty hectic. Deliveries come up like crazy during that time, which can get very annoying, but it means a lot of tips, so I always deal with it. On this particular night, just as 2 a.m. was about to roll around, one last delivery came in, and I was next in line to take it. I was annoyed because I was ready to end my shift and go home to sleep. But I sucked it up and took the delivery, since I didn't have a choice. I knew the street by heart and where to go immediately. I should mention the reason we do bicycle deliveries is because the roads can get busy during college season, so using bicycles sometimes makes deliveries faster. I rode my bike as fast as I could and reached the house in under 10 minutes. When I knocked on the door, there was no answer. I knocked again, louder this time, but still no response. I was frustrated because if no one answered, I would have to take the order back to the store, which would have been a complete waste of my time. I called the number on the receipt, but there was no answer. As I was about to call the store, I heard rustling sounds coming from some bushes directly across the street from me. I figured it was probably the wind, but decided to take a look. When I did, my stomach dropped, and a sense of dread washed over me. I saw the dark figure of a person crouching behind the bushes in someone's yard, and although I couldn't make out any facial features, I knew that he or she, though I figured it was a man, was watching me. My heart raced, but it didn't seem like he noticed I had seen him. I pretended not to notice and knocked loudly on the door again, but still, no answer. My panic increased, wondering if this could be some kind of trap. I glanced again, and the figure was still crouched, watching me. I kept knocking on the door, hoping someone would answer. After what felt like hours, someone finally stumbled out of a room and sluggishly answered the door, sounding annoyed. I explained about the order, and he told me he hadn't placed it, but it was probably his roommate. Unfortunately, the person who actually ordered was passed out drunk upstairs. How he had managed to pass out so quickly after ordering is beyond me. The guy went upstairs to try to wake him up. Not even a minute later, I heard more rustling from across the street. I glanced back and saw that the man had moved a little closer, probably to get a better view of me. I could tell he was still watching. Fear surged through me, but I didn't want to leave my bike unattended in case the man stole it. Plus, I didn't know if this guy was armed or what his intentions were. Thankfully, the guy came back downstairs and said his roommate's door was locked, and he wouldn't answer. At that point, I was desperate to leave. I convinced him to sign for his roommate's order, even though there wasn't a tip included. I didn't care about the tip. I just wanted out. After he signed, I handed him the food, quickly thanked him, and hurried to my bike. As I put the kickstand up, I suddenly heard the man from the bushes lunge out. I looked to my left and saw him sprinting toward me. He was wearing jeans, boots, and a black hoodie with the hood up, and I think he had some kind of mask on. I couldn't see much besides his eyes, but I'm almost sure he had a blade in his hand. I had to act fast. I couldn't turn around because he'd catch me before I could get away. The only option was to head toward a nearby bike trail, even though it was pitch black, and I didn't have a light on my bike. I pedaled faster than I ever had before and sped down the dark trail, listening for footsteps and watching for shadows. The trail wasn't long, and luckily, I knew it by heart. I didn't see the man while I was on the trail, and I made it back to the store safely. I was breathing heavily, trying to process what had just happened. I didn't tell my boss or coworkers about it, and I didn't call the police since I didn't get a good look at the guy. I just clocked out, packed my stuff, and drove home, grateful I had my car that night. I made it home safely and never saw the man again. To this day, I don't know if he wanted to rob me or if his intentions were worse. Since that night, I haven't worked another midnight shift, and now I carry nunchucks with me whenever I work night shifts. Newark isn't known for being dangerous, but that night showed me that anything can happen anywhere, to anyone, at any time, no matter how safe the area might seem. I used to deliver for Uber Eats. I was having trouble paying off my student loans, so I was hustling to make whatever cash I could. I still lived with my parents at the time. It was late at night, and I was picking up an order from some fast food place in Wilmington, North Carolina, and delivering to some house about 20 minutes away. I often did late-night deliveries and Uber rides because the pay was higher and I could bang out more deliveries and rides without traffic. I was already en route to the address, leaving the more populated residential area of Wilmington and heading toward the quieter part with all the forest and farms. Most of the roads over there were pitch black and void of any other cars at that late hour. I turned off the main road onto a side road with a dead-end sign. This was the road the directions were taking me to where the address was. I was brought to the last house on this road. The lights to almost every little house on the stretch were off. It was just pitch black, even the house that I was supposed to be delivering the food to. I had to keep my car headlights on just to even see, and so I wouldn't trip on anything. I was also using my flashlight on my phone to navigate my way to the porch of this house. I'm not lying when I say there was not a single light on. I even felt the overgrown grass rubbing on my shins as I walked to the front door. This didn't feel right. I pressed the doorbell button but didn't hear a ring, so I knocked. The customer had their delivery preference set to contact delivery, which means I'd have to physically hand it off to him or her. I messaged the customer that I was at the front door and asked if they could confirm the address. He read it right away and responded, "Give me a second." I replied, "Okay." And he read it. I waited in the dark, looking at the windows of the house, waiting for a light inside to turn on. I was thinking, there's no way this is the right house. I followed up again, asking him if he could type out his address. He started typing. It took a while before he sent a message saying, "I see you, you're at the right house." The next thing I realized was that there were no cars anywhere. This was making no sense. I asked the customer to confirm what kind of car he sees outside. He replied that he sees my light. Well, that pretty much confirmed that I was at the correct address, but it didn't make this any less sketchy. I started to inch away from the door, just because I didn't want to be on top of it as they opened the door. But the door never opened, no matter how many times I messaged the customer on the Uber Eats app. I was starting to suspect this was some kind of scam to get free food. Then, I heard a voice come from outside, in the darkness surrounding me. It was a male's voice calling, "Over here." I started to wave my flashlight all over the place, trying to reveal whoever just said that. I said out loud, "I'm leaving the food on the front porch." I didn't know who I was talking to, nor could I see them. I was terrified that I was about to be attacked, so I walked back to my car, not trying to draw attention by running. When I got to my car, I heard this distinct air-leaking sound that I could immediately recognize as air leaking from a slashed tire. I took a look and saw that both the tires on the left side of the car were slashed and leaking air. I could only assume in the moment that the two tires on the right side had also been slashed. I got into the car and locked the doors first thing. All four tires showed low tire pressure warnings on the dash. Panic started to set in. I was deciding whether to call the police and wait in the car or make a run for it into the dark to a nearby house. I was about to pick the second option. I turned off the headlights on my car and was about to get out of the car, but I noticed someone standing outside my window. I screamed my soul out and then realized that there were at least 4 people standing outside my car, one at every window. They all had on masks covering their faces. I was surrounded. One of them yelled at me to get out of the car now. I didn't know if one of them had a gun or not, and I knew that if they did, by the time I turned on the car and attempted to drive away with 4 flats, I'd have been shot dead already. I yelled through the window, asking if they were just looking to rob me. One of them said, if I gave them everything on me, they'd let me go. I agreed to do so and unlocked the door. The second I did, the guy outside my door opened it and forcefully pulled me out. At this point, I was beaten and kicked by at least 3 of the guys. They grabbed everything off of me, my smartwatch, my shoes, my wallet, my phone, and even some things out of my glove compartment. I was left on the ground as, however many men there actually were, ran away into the darkness. I was alone. I blacked out from here, and the next thing I remember is waking up, probably half an hour later, still laying on the grass next to my car. They'd stolen even my keys. I managed to get up and navigate myself to the nearest source of light I could find in the distance, which was a small house all the way up the street, closer to the main road. I rang the bell a few times until someone answered through the closed door. I said I'd been injured and robbed and needed to use a phone. Luckily, the woman was willing to help and allowed me to use a phone to call the police and then roadside assistance to have my car towed. Lastly, I called my dad. After police showed up, I was taken back to my car, and they did a short investigation and took as much information as I could give them. After my car was towed away, my dad came to pick me up and bring me home. We left after my car was towed away. My phone's last location was down the street from the incident, and it hadn't been turned on since the night before, meaning they'd probably destroyed the phone. The next day, I gave even more information to some detectives regarding my Uber Eats account, and they were able to quickly trace the customer account back to a guy named Logan, who, long story short, allegedly lost his phone and wallet. Whoever found or stole them was the one to call the Uber Eats delivery with the intention of robbing me. Basically, what I'm saying is, whoever did this to me got away with it. The house where they set this up was a vacant house for sale. My car tires were covered by insurance, but everything else, I ate the loss. This was a painful and expensive but also valuable lesson to not be so naive ever again in a situation like that. I stopped deliveries for a few months, then I went back to doing daytime deliveries.